Clinton students, we are in 2.3, quadratic functions and their zeros, and I want to talk with you about what those words mean that I just said to you. So you are for sure understanding what we're going to do today. All right, what are quadratic functions and what are their zeros? All right, quadratic functions are functions in the form, show you here. They are in the form f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are real numbers. Those are coefficients. C is a constant. It'll actually end up being your y-intercept there. And the domain of a quadratic function consists of all real numbers. In other words, you can plug any number in for x and you will get a corresponding y value out of it, okay? Now, we are interested in solutions to quadratic functions, also known as zeros or x-intercepts. And what we're going to do is take that quadratic function and set it equal to 0. I'm going to set it equal to 0. And these types of functions are called quadratic equations. Quadratic equations, all right? Quadratic refers to the fact that it is second degree. It has an x to the second power. Quadratic functions make the shape of a parabola, which is like an upside down or right side up UV shape. All right, so we are going to solve quadratic equations, and the first way we're going to do it is by factoring. All right, so the first thing we want to factor here, I'm going to go over here to my camera here, write on it with my favorite gel pen, not my favorite color, but my favorite type of pen. 1, it's comfortable. 2, I like gel. We want to deal with the function f of x equals x squared minus 4x plus 3. It's a quadratic function because it has x to the second power. That's your highest exponent. And we're going to find the solution to it, which means where the y value equals 0, where the function equals 0. All right. And the way I'm going to do this first is factoring, where I divide it into things that multiply together equals this function. Now think about factors. Like if I ask for the factors of 24, well, these are things that multiply together to equal 24. 4 is a factor because 4 times 6 equals 24. 2 is a factor because 2 times 12 equals 24. So the word factor means things that multiply together to equal something, okay? Now, what are the factors of a quadratic? Well, if you have a quadratic equation and it doesn't have a coefficient in front of the x term, so it's just a 1. These are rather simple to factor by asking yourself the question, what numbers multiply to be positive 3, so the last term, but they add up to be negative 4, the middle term, the middle coefficient. What numbers multiply to be positive 3 and add up to be negative 4? Where if you're going to get a negative for the one and a positive for the other one, then the only way to get a positive 3 with the negative is if both of them are negative. And positive 3, there are very few numbers that multiply to be positive 3, positive 1 and positive 3, or negative 1 and negative 3. And you can probably tell negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3, but negative 1 plus negative 3 is negative 4. So these are the numbers I want. Therefore, my function factors x minus 1, x minus 3. And for a quick review, what we have done is unfoiled. Okay, what is FOIL? I have unfoiled it. Well, FOIL is when you multiply binomials. Binomial is a parentheses with 2 terms in it. Okay, an expression with 2 terms. If I FOIL it, do you remember old FOIL, where you multiply your first term? So x times x is x squared. You multiply your outer terms, x times negative 3 is negative 3x. You multiply your inner terms, negative 1 times x is negative 1x. And you multiply L for last terms, negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3. combine your like terms and you end up with x squared minus 4x plus 3. Well, sure enough, this, when FOILed out, equals this. And to do it in the reverse, if you start off with this, unfoil it, you get this. All right, now, so we're solving our quadratic equation. That meant letting it equal 0, and we're doing it by factoring. Now, once we get to this point, we're going to use what we call the zero product property. The zero product property. The zero product property says if you multiply any string of things and you get 0 as an answer, one of the things you multiplied had to equal 0. So I am multiplying two things, x minus 1 times x minus 3. Either the x minus 1 has to equal 0, or the x minus 3 has to equal 0. If the x minus 1 equals 0, then x equals positive 1. I just added 1 to both sides. If the x minus 3 equals 0, then the x has to equal positive 3. These then are your solutions. They are your x-intercepts. They are your zeros. In other words, they're the zeros because these are the values that make the function equal 0. The ordered pair that we have here is that when x is 1, y was 0. And when x is 3, y is 0. Okay, now, these are where the graph crosses the x-axis, and we can show it here on our graphing calculator, just so you can kind of understand what we're talking about here. Okay, y equals x squared minus 4x plus 3, press graph. We get this parabola, and notice that here's our x-axis. It crosses our x-axis at positive 1 and positive 3. Those were the solutions that we got, 1, 0, and 3, 0. Notice, this is just a little addition, the constant at the end is your y-intercept. So here's my y-axis, and there it crosses the y-axis at 3. All righty. Now back to our PowerPoint slides. Let's see what else we need to do here. All right, so we did this one. Sometimes you can have a quadratic equation that when you solve it, it's going to have a repeated solution, okay? And when we have a repeated solution, we call it a root of multiplicity 2. All right, so let's think about f of x equals x squared plus 6x plus 9. Let me go back to my other thing because it's just so much easier to write on. All right, so we've got f of x equals x squared plus 6x plus 9. All right, no coefficient in front of the x, so it's just a 1 in front of the x. So I can ask that question, what numbers multiply to be 9, but add up to be 6? How about 3, positive 3, and positive 3? 3 times 3 is 9. 3 plus 3 is 6. That's what we want. So our f of x equals x plus, we're solving it, right? So I need to let that f of x equal 0. So 0 equals x plus 3 times x plus 3. Zero product property says if you multiply two things and you get 0, one of them has to equal 0. So either x plus 3 equals 0 or x plus 3 equals 0. All right, subtract 3 from both sides, either x equals negative 3 or x equals negative 3, which sounds redundant, right? And it is redundant. I got the same solution, but the same solution occurred twice, and there's actually meaning to that. In math, we use the words multiplicity of 2. You could have something that occurred 3 times. And we'll do some of that later, but ours just occurred 2 times as a multiplicity of 2. And this is going to be a special kind of 0 that only touches the x-axis. It doesn't actually cross it. All right, so let's go back and look at our first one. We had 2 different zeros. Oops, camera, but you shall recover. 2 separate zeros for that first one, right? X is 1 and X is 3. But now I'm going to do the second one on top of it, x squared plus 6x plus 9. And let's make this one a little bit darker here. Remember that you are welcome to come and check out one of the graphing calculators for the 7-week class here in the math lab. All right, here's the other one. All right, notice the first one we did had 2 places that it crossed. The second one had 1 repeated solution, multiplicity 2, and on this graph, it only touches there, okay? It touches, so it is an x-intercept. It touches at the x-axis, but it doesn't cross it. So at multiplicity of 2, it's going to touch the x-axis and not cross it, okay? All right, let's go back here to our PowerPoint slides and continue on. All right, and we will go in our next video for the square root method, but we're going to end this video right here. Yep, in that slide. We're going to end this video right here, and your keyword is zeros, because now you know that zeros are the same thing as x-intercepts, or it's the same thing as the solution of a quadratic equation. I'm pretty sure you're going to have a homework problem that asks you that. In other words, it's going to ask you to keep solving it, but what they're actually doing is just asking for the same thing using 3 different terms. So I ask you for the points and they'll call them zeros. They'll ask you for the points and they'll call them x-intercepts. And they'll ask you for the points, but they'll call them solutions. And you're going to have a lot of work to do if you think you have to find it all 3 times. But if you recognize that all 3 of those are the exact same thing, they're all the zeros, then you will get through that problem pretty fast. All right, we'll see you in the next video.